Well, welcome back to Connections in Flight. I'm Erika Paramore.
I'm Sarah Mizuguchi.
Join us as we have another meaningful conversation about navigating our current life flight. How are you, Sarah?
Peachy.
You look very floral and spring-like today. Any big plans today?
Yes, I'm going out to dinner after this for one of my kids' birthdays.
Oh, How old are we turning?
15.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gosh, do you remember 15?
I do. A lot, actually.
I know. Isn't it funny how it all goes so fast?
I know. Well, that's funny that you brought that up because I have a lot to say about my kids today.
Oh, I can't wait.
I know. I put a lot of thought into this session because they're my kids and I want to respect that whole dealio. But it is something that's happening in my life right now. And they don't listen to this podcast anyways, they've all said.
Yeah, but once they hear what's in your carry-on, I have a feeling everyone's going to tune in, especially my 14-year-old daughter.
My kids told me, quote,
you got some good stuff.
They said, quote, that's not our kind of podcast, Mom. So I know. I was like, well, can you just hit play so I get a listen, please?
And a share. Yeah.
So it's funny what's in my carry-on today because it's a little bit of a roundabout story. I'm going to try to tell it succinctly, but this is kind of organic how this word came to be for one of our podcast therapy-esque episodes. So I was looking for a book to read that's not self-help, but that's just a book to take me out of my world. So I've kind of gotten into like magical realism and a little bit of like sci-fi.
Wait. Magical realism and sci-fi?
Yeah, like vampires, things like that. A tech I work with, she was like, Sarah, you've got to read this book called A Discovery of Witches. It's by Deborah Harkness. This is not a new publication. This book has been out for over 10 years. I was like, you know what? I own a copy of that book. That's so funny that you would recommend that book because it's been sitting on one of my bookshelves for over 10 years. I started reading the book. It's about vampire sex. I love it. And I started thinking, who is this person that wrote this book? Because you just have to be so intelligent, I think, to even come up with these characters and the food and everything about it. So I kind of went in a rabbit hole of who the author, when the book came out, who the author is, what's been going on. And she wrote this book over 10 years ago. She's had a history of a cancer since she wrote this book. And the same day that I was having all these thoughts, I got an email from one of my kids, I guess a college counselor. My oldest kid is 17. He's a junior. And he had been in like one of his first meetings to start thinking about colleges. And I opened this email and the counselor was like, to the parents of so-and-so. And he was like, okay, here's your list of colleges. And number one was LSU. And it said in parentheses, I think this is your best fit because you want a city with good food, close parentheses. And I think it was kind of like funny, but I was like, we're not going there. My son and I aren't going there. But I thought to myself, I'm not going to college. My son is going to college.
But the immediate reaction was to put the we in there?
My immediate reaction, I have nothing against LSU at all. I interviewed there for residency. I thought it was amazing. But my immediate reaction is, we're not going there.
Why?
Well, that's what I kind of want to talk about because it took me back. I had just gone down this rabbit hole about my first edition, and I started thinking, I want my first edition of my kids. I want all the things I had thought were going to happen. My kids are getting older. I'm in this period where it's like they're still children. We've had the whole frontal cortex talk, but is it time for me to step back?
So the first edition of how you pictured their lives to be, or what the younger version of their lives?
I think both, to be honest. I think both, a little bit of both, but it really struck me like, why would I have said that about we? And why can't I see that as like exciting instead of where I had envisioned that maybe his first choice would have been?
Do you know inside yourself what the resistance to?
No.
Because if it was a school that you would have applied to, was the we about the idea or feeling of imagining him going somewhere without you? Or was it about the place?
I have no idea, and that's why I want to talk about what we're going to talk about today and the word that we're going to talk about today, which came to me thinking about all of this and The word is attachment.
Attachment is probably the most, what's the best word to describe this? There is not a word that means more to me in my work than attachment. Every case, every client, every trauma, every personality comes back to understanding attachment. Well, this may be a theme that we end up using in more episodes. There's no way we can tackle all of attachment theory in this. And I don't want to say we're going to go into attachment theory like it's this clinical heavy concept, but I think the reason it's so important is because when we have awareness of our own internal security attachments, it really helps us understand how we connect to not only other people, but to things in our life. So when we're wondering, like, why am I feeling this way? Or what's going on here? Why did I do this? Why did I say this? Understanding what allows us to feel securely regulated in ourselves versus like dysregulated, we can get so much insight. So I love that we're talking about attachment. Does attachment, when you think of that word alone, just not even in context to what, the example, what does attachment mean to you?
Liking how things were, probably in my head. Liking how I had thought things would go.
There is a wonderful phrase by Wayne Dyer. He was a psychologist years and years and years ago, and actually had a client bring me all these old cassette tapes he found in his aunt's house of Wayne Dyer. And when I was just out of graduate school, and one of the things he said in terms of his life, I think there was like 7 life principles: attached to nothing, stay open to everything. And it was about attaching ourselves to outcomes.
Did you just pull that quote out of your ass? That's
well,
amazing.
I remembered him.
Oh my God, Erika.
I remembered him. It was so profound.
That was amazing.
But that really, I mean,
I was like really getting carried away that you remembered a quote from after grad school. So tell me it again.
But these are the ones that stick.
Right.
These are the ones, I'm sure you have things like this.
Of course, I do.
But it's attached to nothing, stay open to everything, which is like the idea of like, if I think this is the answer, it could be, but I'm open. And I think his reference, this is going to sound bizarre, was about like the architecture of the Empire State Building.
What is that?
This was like the World Fair in the long before when America was starting. And if everyone thought buildings and architecture should look the same, and then this architecture blueprint for the Empire State Building, which looks so different as a skyscraper than any other rectangle building, if people were only attached to their one outcome, we would never have design. Think about the artistic, creative realm. We have to be open to ideas, right? We're curious. And I think based on some of the other topics we've had with struggle and burnout, and that if we think about attachment with openness to lots of different outcomes, I wonder if you feel a different shift in resisting anything but. Like the first edition was your outcome. And instead of thinking that's not going to happen and feeling grief around that, if we talk about other possible outcomes, are open to that, I wonder what would happen inside.
I literally have no idea. This is so fresh because it's just kind of going on right now. He's my oldest, so this is just the beginning because I have 2 kids younger than him. Apart from what I feel about it, and this is another word that I was thinking about for the podcast, was boundaries. I was kind of attached to how I wanted to see his life play out, maybe in the next year or 2. Maybe I was having visions of what I thought that should be. And now that we're here and I'm realizing it's not, number one, it's not my life. Number 2, I mean, this kid is awesome, okay? There's nothing wrong with this kid. I love this kid, obviously. I love all my kids. But I also was thinking my vision is not necessarily correct vision. How do I let him know that it's okay to set boundaries with me? And let him know that I trust him, and let him know that I trust his decisions. I don't know, it's hard.
It is
honestly.
hard. And you're talking about some really big concepts, because this example with a child is that if you think about as a mom when he came into this world, your boundaries for him to keep him safe and alive have changed, because now he's 18 and can get in the car and go get food. And when he was born, he depended on you to keep him alive. From a psychological standpoint, this is such a fundamental key principle. So if we look at what attachment theory is, right? This was really discovered by John Bowlby, Bowlby, and he was sort of the founder of attachment theory. And what that concept is that when we are born into the world as a newborn, we can't get too much love, right? We're not going to spoil a newborn baby. The ages between 1 and 3 years old is where I call it like the grid work of our nervous system, our emotional development gets laid. So our goal in life as a newborn is to make sure we don't die, right? So how do we do that? If our distress, when we cry, a newborn cries or a 1-year-old cries, their brains aren't developed enough. They don't have all the circuitry to use. They don't have language. They can't tell you what they need. But when their distress is met with care, they feel secure in their nervous system, and that's where all of that adaptive circuitry happens in their brain. 70% of their brain circuitry that sends signals to their nervous system of being safe in the world happens between 1 and 3 years old. So what we're talking about here, and this is a little bit complicated, I'll make it more simple as we go forward, but the essence of what we're looking at is, as a baby and as an adult, how do we feel secure in the world, right? And we feel that in our nervous system. We use the word regulation. Right now, I'm okay.
I've been doing that.
I know. We've been working on it. Exactly. That's exactly what we're working on.
But now I want to help him do it.
Right.
Because I'm like, now I'm messing up his regulatory nervous.
You're not messing it up. You're not messing it up now. But as he's developing, it's shifting. And that's what you're trying to understand in terms of boundary work. So what we're looking at, if a baby finds delight in its foot, right? It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, they do.
Right?
They do.
And that mom mimics the delight that she sees in that baby's face. Again, that is another security signal in that baby's body. So it's that they're attuned with you. Because if you have no emotion, and they've actually shown videos of this, where a mom will come in, the baby's in the high chair, and the baby's like, say, 2 years old, and just kind of pointing, and the mom points and mimics the joy, and you can see that baby totally regulated. That same mom comes back in stoic. And the baby's pointing, and she's just like a robot, just doesn't even have any affect. And you can see that baby's distress heighten. It may go, looks around, throws the fork on the floor, and starts to cry, and is like desperate to get the mom. And again, this is not just mothers that are the caregivers. It could be a father, it could be any person who's really making that baby feel safe in the world, like 70% of the time that it's with it. So sometimes we're kind of like distant. It's not going to ruin a baby's regulatory system, but it's about the consistency of that pattern.
Sure.
Because if you think about primitive times, if a baby was left in the woods and the mom or the thing feeding it and protecting it did not react to it, its distress, it would start screaming and crying so that the woman in the village down the street or whatever would come rescue it. It's like the instinct to have care during distress is what keeps us alive.
Right.
The 3-year-old or whatever begins to feel more secure in the world. If a parent is, and I'm going to use an extreme example here, but if we have an addict parent who comes in sometimes through the door angry, over the top emotional, and we don't know what caused that as a 3-year-old, that's going to create a different sense of internal insecurity.
Right.
There's insecure and secure attachment. Right?
No, I don't know. I don't even know why I said yes, because I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you know what secure attachment feels like, where you feel regulated, and we know what insecure feels like. These are not about secure or insecure people. It's a state that we feel inside our nervous system.
Okay, that helps. I was thinking more of security, like, am I insecure or... Right.
So there are 2 psychologists, Sue Marriott and Ann Kelly, who have a wonderful podcast, Therapists Uncensored.
Oh, I've listened to that.
They are amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
They did a wonderful job describing this visually. So if you think of a light spectrum, you've got infrared over on one end, you've got blue, ultraviolet on the other. One's really high, blue is kind of low, right? So if in the middle of that spectrum is green, and that's like a secure attachment frequency in our body, we're aware of what's around us, but we feel secure. That's the goal. We always want to try to move towards that state. If we have a very inconsistent, erratic parent who lives in this red attachment insecure state, we're going to feel that in our body. So that you fast forward that 3-year-old to a 26-year-old who's like, why didn't they text me back? Panic. They're going to feel that dysregulated state, even if nothing's technically wrong, because they didn't feel safe in the world. They didn't know how to connect to that part of themselves young. This other end of the spectrum, blue, is I'm only safe in the world when I'm alone.
Oh, I have that.
In your bio for this, what was your quote?
Oh my God, no one is coming. Yeah, I'm avoidant.
So if I'm only okay, when I'm only secure, it's not really a secure state. I think I'm safe when I'm alone on the island or the mountain or whatever.
Right.
The reason it's insecure is because I'm not in relationship. Right? These are attachment styles.
Well, how can I be on the avoidant side and not make my kid now be in the green? I guess.
Okay, you can't make him be in the green.
Yeah, watch me.
But what we're talking about is our own awareness of where we go in response to where someone else is. So if he's in the green, it's easier for you to move towards green.
Right.
If he's red, you go blue.
Oh, I love that. Wait a minute. I like that. If I'm in the green, it's easier for him to come to the green. If he's, now that's lovely.
The goal. This may not catch with people right away. This is
It's taking me a minute, to be honest.
But it's, once you see it, it is so helpful. And we will show a visual of this light bar that just helps take all the whys.
Right.
Like, why is he doing that? Why won't he do this? Throw that out the window. Just look at what state is that person in, and what do I need more of to move towards a more secure state. It will give you so much insight. And that's why when we talk about the mindfulness, the grounding, we're working on our internal states of security. So once we're more regulated, guess what we can use? Our frontal lobe. Teenagers, they're going to be in all these different states at different times because they're figuring that out. So this is not about blaming mothers or fathers when their kids were younger, but it's about how even if we made huge mistakes, and maybe we were more red, maybe we were addicts and we got sober and we are in a different place now. The most wonderful news is that all of these can be repaired. All of this can be shifted. This is not damage. But if we don't have the awareness of where we are, then it's hard to attach to others. This is not clinginess. Attachment is not about codependency or desperation. Like, if I'm not with this person, I'm going to die. It's about, if I throw you a ball of green yarn, it's secure yarn. If I toss it to you and you catch it, we have a string. We have an attachment bond. And then you're going to look to me to throw it back. And if I'm ready, you'll toss it. And then we have another string. And every time we go back and forth, there's more secure bonds, attachment bonds. If I have a red ball of yarn and I pound you with it in the face, that's an insecure attachment bond. If you just take your yarn and you walk away from me because you're blue now, that's an insecure attachment state. So we're trying to find as many green strings and bonds of yarn, and we're learning how to do that. And it's not necessarily with them doing what we say they need to do. It's about just seeing where that person is, especially if they're in distress, and meeting them with care.
So, okay, this is pretty sophisticated. I felt like it's becoming a point between my child and I where we're both starting to feel anxious about it when we know a conversation has to come up. This is not special to us. I think this is something that a lot of people go through when their kids are, so for example, college, studying for the ACT, even like high school sports. So now when these things are coming up, I can feel the energy between us as on the red. I know.
Good for you.
I know it.
So if you're speaking for yourself, what do you understand?
Always speaking for myself.
But you said the energy between us, which I appreciate you noticing his energy too. And then how do you react to, if he's red and you're red, where does that leave you, right?
So let me give you another example. This just happened 2 nights ago. He's standing doing dishes because he's such a good kid.
Well, that's green.
Well, I'm about to turn it red. So I come home and I'm like, okay, how am I going to bring up if he's been studying for the ACT? Because that's where I went. Because I am his flipping mother.
Yes,
like,
you are.
I've got to ask. I mean, I just wanted to make sure he's studying. So I asked him how his day was. And then I'm like, how's the ACT going? He's like, Mom, why is that the first thing that you ask me when you come in here? And it went so red now that I've got this beautiful spectrum to put it in. And my first thought I did not say this, but my first thought I wanted to say is because I'm your fucking mother and it's my job because I want you to meet your full potential. I did not say that, but instead, I don't remember what I said. I just said something like, well, I just trying to, make sure, blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what I said. Okay, so then he walks out and then I go downstairs. I'm like doing some stretches because I've been in the car all day. And he comes down there and I get red in my mind. But instead, he's asking me something about some cowboy boots or something that he wants. And like he'd already let it go.
He went to green.
He already was in green. And I just thought that was so beautiful that he could so quickly go back to green.
Can I tell you what's also so awesome about this example? You both went red. And then he made a new bid for connection with green. He came downstairs to talk to you about the cowboy boots that are not about the cowboy boots. It's about connecting with you in a green way.
Oh, God, that's so cool.
So the bid for connection is when we have a moment of delight or distress, and does the person see us where we are in a secure way? If it's a red way, or if they don't see us because they're blue, we're going to put another bid for connection. And that's in those years between 1 and 3 years old. Every time the baby cries, every time the baby finds its foot, that's a bid for connection with the caregiver. So that's how you have to think about how do we respond to someone that we care about, their bid for connection. And sometimes if it's red, instead of matching the red, if we think about, okay, how do I stay green here so they can move towards green?
Right.
And sometimes they can't, but something in him may have felt like, ooh, I was red. Or, maybe he owned his own thing and maybe he was like, oh, she's right, or whatever. Something in him made another bid for connection. How did you respond to the cowboy boot?
Oh my God. I didn't say anything, but in my mind, I was like, I'm so happy he came down here.
Exactly.
And just started a silly conversation about these boots he wants on the internet. And I did not bring up the ACT again. But I did think to myself, like, how do I be this cool?
Cool, like inside your body, or cool, like, what do you mean?
Like, how do I become to him to be in the green now that I know this color analogy, instead of coming to him? And I do believe in energies. I do believe that, like, when I walked in the room that night from work, and I'd worked 12 hours, drove home 3.5. I just brought bad energy. I brought the red.
It's not that it's bad energy. It's that there was some distress in you. And it could be that the whole topic isn't about whether he just studied. It's about even the connection to him leaving to go to college.
Right.
So it's not necessarily in your brain. It's like even the responsibility I have as a parent to make this go well for him.
Right.
And I think it's totally complicated. This is real.
Oh, believe me, it's real. And so even about the email from the college counselor, putting the school, number one, he's never mentioned that school before. And then I'm like, well, he's picking it for a city with food. Like, that's not what we've been prepping for.
But you know what I hear in that, Sarah? This is not about the school or your son. This is about that protective part in you of your son, about the person who's helping us with this next big decision. We're not having a secure attachment bond right now.
No.
Like, this is not what we do. So the we isn't about you going to college. I think it was about, in this process, something is feeling insecure here.
Right. It definitely
does.
does.
I think that's why just noticing it. If I'm red in a moment with something that's going on with another person, what's happening inside of me? What's feeling unsafe or insecure? So when I say safety, it's not like you're in a real threat of danger, but your signaling in your nervous system is like, something's not secure here. So you have options then, right? So if you had a school that he was going to go to, and how dare anybody say another school? That's not what was happening.
No.
It was about the values in the process
Right.
of finding the right place for him to go next, especially when he's leaving the
Right.
nest. So I think it's like, is it a ha 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 just for the food?
Right.
Like, there was something that was like, wait, we are taking this really seriously. This is a big deal. There could have been something so subconscious that was reacting to that. And this is where texting and emails can be very misunderstood, because what someone's tone may not be the other's. So just being aware of, okay, if it's true that I'm having this reaction, what do I need to know more of to be green? Is that what this person meant? You could email that person back and say, what are the other things that make you think this is the right fit for my son?
Well, the other thing about this time is, aren't I his frontal lobe? Like,
Yeah. Well,
don't-
remember, it doesn't just poof show up at 25. It's still growing. He's got a lot of it. He's got more now than he did at 3.
I do realize that, but I was thinking I'm entering a phase where I need to acknowledge that he might know what's better for him than even I
Okay,
do.
great question. And I think that this is what is so hard about parenting, because what we're always looking at, and this is where the boundaries come in, I think, as we are adjusting, and there isn't a perfect set of right and wrong when it comes to boundaries. What we're looking, the word boundary, oftentimes people think it's what are we saying no to? What are our limits? But it's what we're protecting, right? The common denominator with boundaries and the word attachment is security. It's how do we protect? And so what you had to do to protect him as a 3-year-old is different than a 10-year-old, is different than a 16-year-old, is different than a 25-year-old. And those are adjusting and they're complicated. Your boundaries for each child may be completely different because of what they need to feel safe in the world. So what is best for him in terms of his own safety in the world, for his autonomy, for me to say, wait a second, this is where it is okay for me to step in. Do I need to helicopter? No, but I think checking in about security is completely healthy, and you're going to get some resistance, because didn't we all at 18 think that we had the maturity and the answers, and even at 25, we thought we kind of figured it all out, and we always are learning. But I think he does have a lot that you already recognize that keeps him safe and successful. But there's a lot of gray areas too.
Yeah, there are a lot of gray areas, and I've just realized that I could be doing a better job.
At
and
what?
It's being in the green instead of...
Doesn't the color spectrum
Oh my
help?
God, the color
It's
spectrum's
a
amazing.
Game changer.
But I was a little disappointed in myself because quite a few years ago, I did think to myself, I really want my kid to grow up to be who they want to be, not what I want them to be. I really feel that way in my soul.
That's that open to everything, attached to nothing. That's good.
Right. And the other thing that really helped me come to that realization is I had some ridiculous ideas, I think, when I had my first child, but then you have another one, and they're all so different. Mm-hmm. You don't honestly almost have a choice, but just to be like, well, they are who they are.
Adaptability.
I don't think I'm being very adaptable.
Well, I think that what you're learning is what each of your children need to get into their green state. Mm-hmm. And so often we give the other person we're in relationship with what we need to be green. So if I feel so green when I have this like emotional, deep, insightful conversation with my husband, I'll just make this up, and he doesn't really need that to feel green,
right?
I'm going to keep giving him that, and he made me like more blue because I'm like coming to him about my state. But vice versa, like us sitting down and watching a football game together when we're not really saying anything, but he just feels the closeness and the recreational companionship. And I'm like, why am I even here? We're not even talking. Mm-hmm. But he feels green in that. And I feel like I'm totally blue because I'm like, oh, I don't even know why I'm bothered. Or maybe I'm getting red inside because I got stuff to do. And why am I wasting my time sitting here when we're not even talking? But if I know that that's where his green state is, of us just being shoulder to shoulder, watching the game, that's how he feels secure. And he knows I feel that way in conversation. We can help give each other what we need to get more into that state. And you're doing the same thing with your kids.
Well, the other thing that's very interesting is I think I knew about how to get everyone in the green for so long because they were little. And now
you just found their foot with delight.
Yeah, like we just rolled around and like ordered ice cream, you know.
But it's not the ice cream that makes someone green. It's the safe in the world. It's the ritual. It's the seeing where they are and meeting that with care.
Okay, let me say something else that just popped in my mind. So one night, I don't even remember what we were talking about for colleges. I was like, okay, let's go see X, Y, and Z schools. And he wasn't interested or something. But I was like, my parents didn't do this for me.
We've all been.
My parents did not take me around the country to see 60 different schools. Okay. I wanted to go to Pepperdine. I can assure you we did not go see Pepperdine. And he got so mad and he was like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, Mom. And what do you think that's about? My son was just like, why would you even go there to when you went to college?
Okay, so here's what he's saying. We're not in a comparison trap. This is me, and this is you, and here's where we are today. And when you compare me to what you did or didn't have or why I should be so blank, it feels like shame.
Oh, my God. I would never want him to feel like that.
Of course you don't.
No, I would not. Oh.
But think about what you do to yourself.
Right.
You compare yourself to, what you should do to succeed. I mean, it's the comparison trap of the should. We're going to throw shoulds out the window. Mm-hmm. Beautiful thing about attachment, it's in the now.
I've been telling myself that, but sometimes it just doesn't work.
In the now. How do I connect with care?
Right.
And it doesn't mean you can't talk about details. This is the misunderstanding with this process. Just attuning with the nonverbals,
right.
Looking at him in the eye, whatever emotional state he's in, and just listening, reflecting, letting him feel seen and heard.
Right.
That's where his amygdala will quiet down all the red, mm-hmm. and then his nervous system will shift out of that fight or flight potential threat to that vagal calmness, mm-hmm. where he can rely on the frontal lobe, mm-hmm. to then have the details of the studying or the itinerary for the college visits. But unless we securely connect to the emotional part of that, we can't shift into that more frontal lobe area. So where these states are happening are in that right brain, in the now, the emotion, and it's getting flooded, right? It's like you're throwing a lifeline and you're like, I'm here, I'm sitting with you in the dark. I'm not fixing the problem. I'm just sitting right here with you. And that safety, as you know, this is secure in the world. I'm not alone in the world.
Right.
Will help him be more rational and logical and linear. Now,
so I want to stop here for a second, because I really think this message is for pretty much any parent of any child of any age. And I honestly wish I'd started therapy earlier, because this is so helpful. I mean, I could have used this in middle school. In fact, I'm thinking I actually could use this the most right now with mm-hmm. getting us to the green.
Well, and I think the thing in a weird way is that this is very liberating, because it takes some of the pressure off of us to fix it. And that really reminding ourselves the value of connecting with care. And I'd like to use the metaphor almost of like the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy and Scarecrow are going arm in arm. They're helping each other navigate. The mom is not the Wizard of Oz, mm-hmm. behind the curtain. We're walking down the yellow brick road together. And right now, when they're younger, they're in the stroller on the yellow brick road. I mean, you're doing more of the care. But as they get older, you're there to help in some ways, but they're also there to help you. Mm-hmm. But I think it's always about helping them feel not alone in it.
How do you think this all relates back to attachment? I mean, just taking it back to the attachment theory, is this just part of it? Because you gave the story about when you're little, mm-hmm. then that 1 to 3 age, which is so critical. Mm-hmm. Now, having older children, do you think the neuroplasticity is still there?
Always.
Right.
Oh, at 80 years old, the neuroplasticity can still be there. That's how we talked about creativity, doing new things. Absolutely. That's what's so exciting about this.
It really is.
It can always change. Absolutely.
Such
Great
positive.
question.
I mean, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not just if maybe you had a couple of rough years with your kid.
Well, let me tell you something. This has nothing to do, and this, if there's one thing I have to say so clearly, this is not about blaming parents. It may be that a parent has twins, or a 1-year-old and a newborn. The 1-year-old has more health issues, and that mom has to tend to that baby more than mm-hmm. the newborn. And the newborn's not getting all of that care met with distress kind of from the mom. It does not mean the mom is neglectful or none of that. Mm-mm. But it just sometimes does have an effect on the nervous system, but it doesn't mean it can't be repaired. And the best way we can do, I don't care if you have a 3-year-old, a middle schooler, an 18-year-old, this could be with husbands and friends, and it's being genuinely curious with care in verbal and nonverbal communication in the now, connecting and seeing them where they are.
I love it. I'm going back a lot to the struggle about the present, being present and mindful, exactly. And all of that. Also, the amazing thing about this talk is I really am thinking a lot of ways I could use this with my friendships. Mm-hmm. I hate to make this all about kids, but this really applies to so many things now that I'm kind of really thinking about it.
And do you know the number one signal in your body that will tell you when there needs to be a better boundary?
Tell me.
Resentment.
Ooh.
If you find yourself resenting a situation,
wow,
there needs to be a boundary, because you're putting someone else's needs before yours, and the stronger that need is that you're not listening to. I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice. If your boss is like, you're going to be fired if you don't do that, whatever. But if there's a pattern to it, and we're like, why do I keep accepting this? Sometimes we don't even know why, but if we start to notice that state inside of ourselves, there needs to be a boundary.
I love this talk so much. I feel like it was really sophisticated on some of the things you said.
It is a lot right now. And I appreciate that listeners may be like, oh my God, this is a lot of information. We will use this in a lot of different situations.
I'm actually so glad this came up. I feel so much lighter about all this. I really do. Because I was really starting to be like, is this podcast appropriate? Because I need some serious therapy over this. Because I feel like things are going off the rails.
The closer we are to somebody or the more care we have for somebody, sometimes this is where it gets so tricky. But that's why I love it's about understanding the state we're in.
Right. I mean, we are tight.
And let me say, Sarah, your timing of anticipating your oldest child going to college, I think is going to help so many people, because sometimes it's about going to kindergarten, or camp, or or even your child getting married. Right. I mean, it's like there's a shift. It's like, it's a different connection in flight. And yet it doesn't mean the flight's, the connection's over.
No.
It's just a different course of flight. And
I want to enjoy it.
I know. And you will. And there's going to be times where it's not easy, but it's meaningful. And it might not feel like you're enjoying it, but there's purpose in it.
God, Erika, throw me that green yarn.
I know.
I'm going to let you do takeaway, because this is a big one. What do you think? Like a short, what can we all leave with?
Gosh, well, I think we're going to have to put this kind of color spectrum up to help people I think that's a takeaway for people to look at kind of how to understand that.
It's beautiful.
Where you just think about, where am I on the color spectrum, or where is the person who's yelling at me right now on the color spectrum? And it makes it less personal. It makes it it's like if I know where that person is, I can see where do I need to be right now. If someone's really, really red, like violent, I need to go blue. I need to totally detach and get away. And if someone's just being emotional, maybe I need to stay green so I can give them a place to come towards. It's not the same with every person every time, but I think giving people that sense of how to be more aware of that is a huge takeaway. And I think the second takeaway that's very much connected to that are learning about boundaries of what am I saying yes to in myself, not just saying, well, I can't say no to that person. It's my boundary is what I'm protecting because I value it, or it has purpose to me, or I know what will happen if I don't have this boundary in terms of resentment or anger or health or whatever. But I think just giving ourselves permission to kind of just notice and then think about what I need more of to protect in the now. And this takes practice every single day. This is so foreign when you're first learning this, but it's really quite simple.
I love it. Thank you for letting me talk about this.
Well, thank you for talking about it.
And thank you for, let me just give some props to who were the color spectrum is the uncensored.
Oh, uncensored. Yes. It's Sue Marriott and Ann Kelly, and they're neuroscience psychologists. And
thank you.
Because the attachment theory has always been talked about on some form of a continuum, but it's been from an image perspective or a visual perspective, it's been more in categories. I have to be honest with you. There could be other people that they did this with. This is where I first heard of it, and it was a visual for my clients that was so clear.
Mm-hmm. It's very helpful.
It's so helpful. And every trauma, like I said, every disorder, everything comes back to understanding that. And when we understand that, there's a different kind of awareness that we can almost help those parts of ourselves that didn't get what they needed.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, I'm going to dinner for my kid's birthday, as I mentioned. Oh. And I'm going to take with me a big bowl of green. Thanks, Erika.
Well, of course, Sarah. I'm always here for you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to us today on Connections in Flight. Would love to hear back from you. Please feel free to email us, leave feedback or comments.
We'll be back next week with a new word. If you want to discover more about us, please find us in our socials, and all the links are in the show notes.
Please be advised that the information discussed on this podcast is not professional therapy. If you are triggered or activated, please don't be afraid to seek professional help.
Ample. Hee.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, that's on. Don't touch that.